welcome everyone to the Smart Firefighting FirstNet Roundtable and live demonstration today. Today, we're here to learn about how can real-time location-based services enhance your situational awareness, and you're even going to see a live demonstration. My name is Kevin Sofen, and I'm with Darley in smartfirefighting.com. We created smartfirefighting.com to really bring to life the roadmap to the future smart firefighting report that came out in 2015, where it talked about drones, artificial intelligence, smart cities, all these big mega buzzwords, but really, what do they actually mean and how do we bring context to them? So we've hosted webinars, we've hosted podcasts, doing a lot of these things that bring life to what this roadmap tells us about. I've been fortunate to partner with FirstNet and Kyle Richardson and to create content to do some of the same for the FirstNet Authority, to dive into this roadmap, particularly today, location-based services, and wanting to learn, what does this roadmap tell us? Today, we're doing one on location-based services, and we plan to do quite a bit more. The whole point of this is to make this relevant for you, the end user. How do you use this technology? Why is this technology relevant and important? And today, it's going to be a little bit of an organized pandemonium where we have a set timing, but we want you to ask questions. What ideas or questions do you have? We have some amazing people in here that want you to learn from, and I will have some time for Q&A built in at the end. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Kyle, who's in a little intro, and then give us the next run of the show from there.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks for hosting us here today. Really looking forward to this. As you mentioned, we have an all-star cast here, so really looking forward to the presentations. A lot to pack in an hour. So if you would mind, please pull up the list of speakers here, and we'll see who we have on for the show.
Yep. 1 second, sorry.
And so here you see, thank you. So here you see you've got folks from the FirstNet Authority. That's the federal agency and the public-private partnership with AT&T. And we also have Prathima Sima from AT&T. So thank you for joining us. Obviously, Kevin from Smart Firefighting, and then also our partner on the federal side, another federal agency, US NIST. That's the Public Safety Communication Research Division. We have Joe Grasso. So thanks everybody for joining today. There's our contact information. We'll put it up at the end. And if you could go to the next slide, we'll see the run of show.
Oh, excuse me.
Or we'll email Jonathan. So I think here in the middle, the one thing I want to point out is this scenario and demo that Kevin pointed out. This is going to be pretty exciting to see live. Thanks to Jonathan and Kim for giving that a go. But here's kind of our run of show for today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the Director of Public Safety Engagement, Dave Buchanan, who has also joined us today. So Dave.
Thanks, Kyle. Again, my name is Dave Buchanan. I'm the Director of Public Safety Engagement for the First Responder Network Authority. Glad to be with you this afternoon, and thanks for joining us. Our job at the First Responder Network Authority is to engage public safety and the public safety community, understand your operational needs for bringing public safety operations to the public, and how you use FirstNet to do that, and to capture that feedback about your use of FirstNet so that we can use it to improve, enhance, and invest in the network going forward. So the dialogues we have out in the field and the use of these kinds of webinars and these kinds of demonstrations go a long way to help us better understand public safety's needs so that we can, again, improve, enhance, and invest in the network going forward. So I'm looking forward to the dialogue. I'm looking forward to hearing from our experts, and look forward to the learning we're all going to get to do today. I want to thank Kevin and smartfirefighting.com for their support in hosting this and their leadership in the community. It's been great. I want to thank our partners at PSCR and our partners at AT&T who have been tremendous in helping us bring the nationwide public safety broadband network to life. And I want to thank all of our FirstNet Authority again, subject matter experts that you're going to hear from in just a minute. But I want to thank all of you who've taken time out of your busy days to join us, your first responders, your technology leaders, your communication leaders. You've got busy days with important work, and I'm glad you decided to spend the next bit of your afternoon with us learning, sharing, engaging. So thank you for doing that. You see here on slide 4, I wanted to point out you'll hear a lot about our FirstNet roadmap. And for those of you who haven't seen it, you can get it from our website, firstnet.gov/roadmap. You have the actual roadmap document. You see a FAQ document about it. You see an infographic, which is really an executive summary. But the purpose of this document is to really chart our course forward on how we're going to bring about the technologies, the operations, the information and thought leadership necessary to help public safety improve their public safety operations through FirstNet, and how we can invest and enhance and improve the network to do that. So the document, we've already updated it once since the initial release in 2019. The work we do today and the work we do in the field helps us improve it and enhance it going forward as we look forward to future updates. So with that, Kyle, I'll turn it back to you.
Appreciate that, Dave. I really appreciate you joining us today. And I see on the attendee list, we have a lot of other distinguished guests. Like Dave said, your time is important. We really appreciate it. Also want to give a shout out to our CEO, Ed Parkinson, who joined on the line as well. Thanks, Ed, for joining. I know you're in attendee mode here, so look forward to hearing you in the chat. I'm going to pass it over now to Brandon, who's our first presenter for this afternoon session. So Brandon, kick us off here. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Brandon Allen. I'm in Legislative Affairs and Intergovernmental Affairs at the First Responder Network Authority. Before joining FirstNet, I worked in technology and telecommunications policy for the International Association of Fire Chiefs. I'm talking today to provide some context to our conversation about location-based services. Location accuracy and location-based services are something that public safety has advocated for a long time. About 15 years ago, public safety brought this conversation to the federal government, talking to both the FCC and Congress about the need for greater location accuracy. And in response, the FCC really dedicated a lot of resources to solving public safety's location problem in a wireless context. So, the FCC started some rulemakings to address this issue. And about 7 to 10 years ago, public safety kind of turned its attention to the indoor location issue. As many of you know, identifying callers in indoor locations is a challenging feat. And it's something that public safety identified as a major issue in ensuring safe and speedy response to emergency 911 calls. So, before I touch on this slide, I just want to mention that, there's been a lot of attention dedicated to this issue at the federal level. But really now where we are is we're looking at the public safety marketplace. I wanted to highlight these 3 main prongs of what I see as the future of location-based services. First of all, innovation. Innovation has been critical throughout this process of bringing location-based services to public safety. There are great minds that are going into developing the solutions that will help public safety identify and locate 911 callers, identify people in need. But a lot of this innovation actually requires partnerships between the companies developing the solutions and handset makers, chip makers, because a lot of these solutions require information from our smartphones that isn't readily accessible. So a lot of partnerships will need to be made going forward to ensure that these solutions can make it to public safety. And many of those partnerships exist today. Finally, I think one thing that is incredibly important to highlight is that what will determine the future of location-based services and the various solutions that are out in the marketplace is what public safety's experience is with them. At the end of the day, what matters is that the solution works for public safety, that public safety has successes with whatever solution that it's using, and whatever shortfalls we find in these different solutions will drive future innovation. So I think this cycle is really important to highlight because it kind of shows how location-based services will continue to evolve to meet public safety's needs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. And next we got Gary to lead the show here. Talk about, floor is yours, Gary.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thanks everyone for taking some time today from your busy schedule to learn a little bit more about FirstNet. I come to FirstNet after a 45-year career in the fire service. I served the last 20 years of my career as fire chief in the town of Franklin, Massachusetts, which is a community about 25 miles outside of Boston. Concurrent with that, I served 3 terms as the chair of the Communications Committee for the International Association of Fire Chiefs. And by virtue of that position, I represented the fire chiefs on SAFECOM, NIPSTIC, and was an inaugural member of FirstNet's Public Safety Advisory Committee, or PSCI. Next slide, please. So I'd like to begin with an overview of our situational awareness domain. This is one of the 6 domains they just spoke of that make up our roadmap. And it's where we focus our efforts for location-based services. So FirstNet situational awareness incorporates items that address the ability to aggregate and synthesize information in real time from multiple sources, whether that's human, machine, or sensors, and to obtain and present actionable insights for public safety to use in the field. And as you can see here, there's a lot going on within situational awareness. And in the next few minutes, I'd like to highlight a few of the topics that are possible today and some that are in the works for tomorrow. So let's start with GIS and mapping. Most of us are aware of probably have experience with GIS mapping. Most every handheld broadband device today has access to some sort of mapping app, such as Google Maps, Waze, or MapQuest. Most every public safety computer-aided dispatch system today has some sort of mapping component to provide point-to-point travel directions and track usually vehicle assets of an agency. Location-based services is similar but different. Location-based services lends itself to track personnel or other organizational assets beyond what we're familiar with today. And we'll discuss location-based services and the Z-axis a little bit more in a minute. But another part of our situational awareness is sensors and wearables. And both of these are both current and emerging technologies. Think about it. If you're like me and wearing a smartwatch today, it's probably monitoring your heart rate and maybe your blood oxygen levels. Newer ones can measure your blood pressure. Capturing these simple biometrics and a few others may allow incident commanders to detect when the responders are showing increased biometric readings that may signal they're nearing a serious health condition, such as a heart attack or a stroke. The fire service employs a bunch of sensors, from combustible gas indicators and other air monitoring devices to thermal imaging cameras. Imagine being able to transmit information from these devices to a command position, specifically data from the devices as they approach critical trip levels, such as LEL or high temperatures. Cameras and video. There are numerous examples of how body cameras and other video has shaped the way public safety provides services to their communities. Drones and unmanned aerial vehicles are a relatively new entrant to the video marketplace, but have had a huge impact on making safe and effective decisions for public safety. And the last area of situational awareness I'd like to touch upon is data analytics and artificial intelligence. Both of these topics can be a 3-day webinar by itself, but what I want you to know is that data analytics and artificial intelligence may well be that special sauce to bring together all of the information in public safety to allow us to analyze massive amounts of data we can collect to assist in decision-making and response in real-time conditions. Next slide, please. So, FirstNet has 2 immediate priorities in this space. The first is to act as a catalyst to improve mapping and displays technologies, and the second is to promote the integration of 3D mapping solutions into existing technology platforms. To accomplish this, we've been engaged in many activities with industry, academia, and our partners at AT&T to improve the technological ecosystem for public safety. In addition, we work with our partners at PSCR, which Joe Grasso will speak to in a little bit. Next slide, please. So now let's take a little deeper dive into the emerging technology of location-based services. Location-based services, again, it's emerging, and it's a technology that expands and allows us to track what we call the z-axis, or the height of an object above the terrain. It allows us to see the location of a firefighter or police officer, whether they're at grade or on floor number 3. And coming from my fire service career, I can tell you this advancement in technology will be truly life-saving. I recall some of the most terrifying moments of my life where as an incident commander at a building fire, when something bad or unanticipated happened, and not always knowing the exact location of all my firefighters. Having the ability to accurately locate personnel during life-threatening events will greatly enhance personnel safety. With all the promise this technology holds, I want you to remember it's new and emerging. Similar to most new tools, it probably won't meet all of your needs out of the box. But then again, what new tool does? My career in the fire service was long enough to remember when we rolled out the first HRST tool, or Jaws of Life. It provided us with capabilities we didn't otherwise have, but it was heavy, it was expensive, and it was really difficult to operate. Fast forward just a few short decades, and the Jaws of Life are now built by several manufacturers. They're lightweight, they're battery operated, and affordable. And I'm guessing the development of location-based services will follow a very similar but more fast-paced track. It's important, as Brandon alluded to note that location-based services that we know today is a public safety specific product. It's not the location-based services dictated for 911 call accuracy under the final rule of the FCC. Initially, public safety pushed for 911 location-based services for the public, but also for ourselves, because we never really thought that we would have a specific public safety tool for either the fire service or any of the disciplines of public safety. Little did we know that FirstNet would serve as the catalyst for the tool specifically tailored for public safety. So as you can see on this slide here, there are a bunch of challenges that we have. Now that we have these tools, there's still a bunch of challenges ahead of us before we can routinely rely on location-based services in an IDLH environment, or an environment imminently dangerous to life, safety, and health. In terms of performance, for example, what's the accuracy needed to find a trapped or downed firefighter? Should it be pinpoint to the precise location, or is 2, 3, maybe 4 feet acceptable? What triggers the monitoring? Do we need to follow someone, follow their trail like breadcrumbs? Or should it be like a pass device and only show the location when there's a mayday condition? Or probably is the real solution somewhere in between these two? Because for each one of these more precise measurements we have, there's a cost to battery, to life, to form function, so that it's not necessarily an easy trade-off. In terms of operating environments, can this new technology work in all the environments that public safety works? And what happens if there's a loss of LTE connectivity? Will it triangulate with other devices, like a mesh network, or will it simply fail? Mapping is a big deal. Having the knowledge that someone's 30 feet above the height of terrain without a building reference may be just enough information to provide a distraction from our tried and true methods to identify the location of trapped personnel. And although there are some great tools out there that will allow for digital mapping, Lidar mapping, for example, the problem is that these technologies aren't currently linked, and they really need to be. The FirstNet Fire Team is involved in various national code groups to include the NFPA, the ICC, and the Safer Buildings Coalition. It's my hope and vision that someday the codes will require contractors to provide fire departments with 3D mapping as a part of the permitting process, as paper plans are required today. Merging the Z-axis up with other things in our device ecosystem is also a challenge. As we know, although much of what we do in public safety is very similar, fire folks, police folks, and EMS folks from throughout the country pretty much do the same functions, whether that's on the West Coast or the East Coast. We do, however, utilize different manufacturers and form functions to do the same job. Location-based services needs to be standardized. and span both form, function, and manufacturer, so you can find a downed personnel, whether you're in your own jurisdiction or outside of your jurisdiction on mutual aid. Similarly, location-based services must be integrated in all of our existing technology ecosystem so that we can have a full and true operational picture of what's happening on the scene of an emergency, whether that's emergency as a single unit response or a multi-day, multi-jurisdictional operation. I don't want to leave you with the impression that these challenges are insurmountable, because I don't believe they are. Less than 5 years ago, there was literally no functioning Z-axis beyond the proof of concept demonstration. And now we have functioning Z-axis operational in over 50 marketplaces throughout the country. And I'm confident that the challenges that we see on this screen and a few others will quickly be resolved. So that concludes my part of the presentation. And again, thank you for your time today. And I look forward to hearing and seeing the remainder of the webinar. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Gary. Appreciate all that context. Well, next, we are grateful to have Prathima Simha to give us a more deep dive into how this Z-axis technology actually works. So Pramitha, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Prathima, and I'm the product manager for FirstNet app ecosystem and the responsive FirstNet application here at AT&T. I'm truly excited to be talking to you about FirstNet Z-axis, our technology that we just launched. You know, to Gary's point, one of the most frequently requested features that we hear from public safety is to know the location of first responders when they go indoors or when they are in high-rise buildings. So to that end, the FirstNet program launched Z-axis. FirstNet Z-axis provides altitude of the user as height above terrain in feet or meters. This is then coupled with the XY location to give an indication of which building the user is and how high up in the building the user is. The technology is currently exclusively available on FirstNet and is available on major US metropolitan areas spanning over 52 markets. FirstNet Z-axis capability is provided as an API or an SDK for third-party app vendors to use in their apps. And that is available today through the FirstNet API catalog program. Currently, Response for FirstNet, a situational awareness platform from Intrepid Networks, a FirstNet partner, is the only solution where Z-axis is available. Later in this webinar, you'll see a demo of the Response for FirstNet application. We can go on to the next slide. So what is height above terrain? It literally is the height above the ground measured in feet or meters where the user is standing. As shown in picture 1, as an example 1, if the terrain is elevated, the hat is the height from that elevated terrain, as opposed to what's in example 2, where the ground is flat, and that is more understandable that it is a straight up vertical location of the user. Hat itself is computed using a number of factors. First and foremost, it uses a GPS. This is a GPS value from the mobile device to know the XY location of the user. To this, it adds the barometric pressure sensor readings from the user's mobile. AT&T, along with our Z-axis partner NextNav, has deployed altitude stations in major metropolitan areas. These altitude stations measure the local terrain, local weather, and other local environmental information, capture that, and send it back to a server, which uses the barometric pressure sensor reading along with the information that it receives from the altitude stations and the AGPS value, puts them all together to compute hat, which is the height above terrain. The barometric pressure sensor readings from any of these smartphones is a sensitive measurement, and that measurement needs to be calibrated before use. The calibration process itself is included in the application, the response for FirstNet application in our case. And response for FirstNet application will remind the user when calibration is needed, and it will also guide the user through the steps of calibration. The calibration process itself just takes about 30 seconds. And this will have to be done before the device can be used to measure hat readings. In all our testing, the accuracy, the technology has outperformed what FCC's guidelines are. As Gary said, this is really not the 911 technology itself. However, we did compare it against what FCC's guidelines were. And our testing on this has yielded an accuracy of about plus or minus 3 meters over 80% of the time. But we have to say this is something that's sensitive to the environmental conditions, and we're very cognizant of that. So what we've done is, in response for FirstNet application, next to the hat measurement, we do present sort of a traffic light colored dot, green, yellow, red. The green color indicates, basically this traffic light indicates the confidence level of the measurement, the hat measurement that's being displayed. A green dot indicates a high level of confidence. Yellow is reasonable confidence, but indicates a slightly higher degree of margin of error. A red dot shows a lower level of confidence. Typically a red dot, when I see a red dot, it typically means that the barometric pressure sensor needs recalibration, or either I'm in the edge of the coverage area and hence my hat reading has a lower level of confidence. We want it to be transparent, and so we've provided these color-coded dot next to the measurement itself. And I know this is, as Gary was mentioning, very new technology, and we all remember when possibly GPS was technology was launched. Even if you're in one of the buildings, it possibly would show you as in the next building. So there would be this drift that happens as well, and we've all seen that with XY. And so we recognize that this could have a similar drift as well, because it is dependent on the GPS location. And so we want it to be transparent, and that's why we provide the color-coded text next to it. With our first release of this, we are literally just scratching the surface of what this nascent technology can do. We truly believe it has great potential. There are additional things that can be done. For example, we currently do not display the floor level, so that is something that can be done, and presenting this in a 3D visualization format. So lots of cool things that can follow. We can go to the next slide. So on the FirstNet Z-axis, as I said, the altitude stations cover all the major US metropolitan areas with a high density of buildings with 4 stories or higher. So there is a link to see where the coverage area for Z-axis is provided. So before I wrap this up, a few takeaways. FirstNet Z-axis is exclusive to FirstNet. It is measured as hat in feet or meters. It is available in all major US metropolitan areas. And the device used by the user must have a barometric pressure sensor. And most of the smartphones that have come out into the market in the last 3-4 years have a barometric pressure sensor. A little bit of subscriber guidance that I spoke about, device needing calibration before using this. We highly recommend that the user turns on Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on the device. They don't have to be connected to the Wi-Fi, just turning it on. And we all know this is something that enhances the GPS location measurement when you go indoors or underground parking lots and things like that. And hence we ask for that. And the measurement accuracy we've seen is within plus or minus 3 meters. This technology is available today in response for FirstNet, but there is an API for other third parties to incorporate this technology. With that, I pass it back to you, Kevin.
Hey, thanks, Prathima, for that presentation. This is Kyle. Before we move on to the demo, I wanted to bring up a few questions here in the chat. And this is perhaps for you or anybody else that's here as our panelists. So from the audience, is FirstNet still pushing for E911 location-based services, given that it is now available with FirstNet?
Kyle, it's Gary. I can touch upon that.
Please.
The 911 accuracy, location-based accuracy, is currently under FCC rule, final rule. And I can see Brandon's face up there. Brandon and I, when I was with the Chiefs and Brandon was with the Chiefs, we worked on this together. And we've been working on it for quite some time. Golly, time escapes me some point, but I'm thinking that it was a good, 2010, 2011, when it became an issue for the FCC. And they've done all the nationwide testing. Brandon, do you know a little bit on the rollout date on that?
Sure. So it's not quite directly related to what FirstNet's doing, just because it's regulating wireless carriers for their delivery of location information to PSAPs. So there's a little bit of a divide between what's going on there and the kind of the services that FirstNet's providing for locating emergency responders. But the deadline for the initial 3-meter location accuracy requirement is in April of 2021.
Yeah, so that process has been ongoing for quite some time and really nearing its conclusion.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question from the chat. Will Z-axis be available outdoors, even if it's the same as terrain level, to allow SAR, search and rescue teams, to know the altitude to which they are responding?
I can take that. Yes, Z-axis technology is available outdoors as well, as long as it's in the Z-axis coverage area. And it is measured the same way. It's just the height of the user and her mobile device above terrain.
Thank you, Prathima.
There was
And
one last question
before.
Kyle, did you see the one in the Q&A? Actually, sorry, you go.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there. So another question here, and then we'll move on to the demo real quick. How do you address the barometric pressure issue in a live fire environment? Our previous work with Z-axis is that the barometric measurement method is useless and dangerous to use in the live fire environment.
That's a very, very good question, because we all recognize that barometric pressure measurements and sensors vary when temperatures are very high or in high pressure areas. That is, we have planned additional testing to do under such extreme conditions. We had planned it to be done earlier last year, but because of COVID restrictions and situations, we could not complete that. And the timeline has pushed out a little bit, but that is pending, and that is something that we will test, and we'll have more results to come.
Thank you very much. So for now, we're going to pause for the questions. We'll try to get to those later in the presentation. If we want to move on to Jonathan.
And Kim.
Yep.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to actually turn it over to Kim to introduce herself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Coleman-Madsen. I'm with the FirstNet Authority. I've been in public safety for about 25 years, starting in Colorado in emergency communication centers, and then working at the state on public safety land mobile radio and public safety broadband efforts before joining the FirstNet Authority 2 years ago. And Jonathan, you're going to introduce yourself and then we'll kick to the video.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Jonathan Lewin. I actually started as a sworn member of the Chicago Police Department in 1991, just retired last year as chief of the Bureau of Technical Services. I was briefly the CIO for DC Metropolitan Police, and then I joined the authority last year. I'm actually speaking to you from Chicago, from the lobby of a 6-story building. With that, we're going to actually do a very brief video. It's going to be a scenario video, if we can roll that.
Checking, you can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, here this goes.
1913, 1912, disturbance 3600 North Halsted, cross is Waveland.
1913, 1912.
1913, 1912, en route to a disturbance 3600 North Halsted, cross of Waveland, via anonymous caller. Location is inside. No further info.
1913, I've arrived.
1913, on scene 3600 North Halsted.
1913, I got shots fired inside the building. I'm entering now.
Copy. 1913, shots fired entering the building. 1912, still en route. 1921, 1934, supervisor 1930, respond with 1913 and 12 to shots fired.
1912 arrived, entering from west side, main entrance.
Copy. 1912, out with 1913, entering west side of 3600 North Halsted. All units, mapping indicates 1913 is on the 5th floor, floor 5, 73 feet above terrain. Check your phones for additional map info.
1913, subject in custody. Everything's under control.
1913, subject in custody, confirming 5th floor. All other units, slow response. Great job.
So that was obviously just a little scenario video. Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. And are you seeing the video that I'm showing?
We see your cell phone.
Okay, so this is live, and obviously there's always a risk of doing a live presentation. This is an iPhone XR that I've got here. It's on FirstNet. It's got band 14. You might be able to see in there that it is running the response app, Intrepid Response for FirstNet. So this is live. This app is available off the shelf today. This iPhone is off the shelf. I'm using another iPhone also on FirstNet to do this walkthrough here. And what we're going to do now is Kim is actually going to share her screen. And Kim, if you want to, Kim, you want to explain what they're seeing?
Sure. So thanks, Jonathan. I am pleased to share this live demonstration of the Z-axis capability with all of you. Bear with me just a moment.
Kim, one thing is to everyone in the audience, you should be able to zoom in on the screen at different points too. So if, as you want to look around the screen, you should be able to zoom in while Kim is talking through this whole demo.
Jonathan, looks like I'm not seeing you on the mobile app. You might pop back in and pop out, or pop out and pop back in real quick before you head up the stairs. But you all see on the main screen, which is a mobile or a web version of the application. You see he's disappeared, but he'll pop right back in just a moment. So this screen depicts what the dispatcher could see within the comm center, what the incident commander could see, or the EOC could see, or frankly, anybody who has a web version could be on a tablet even. And there's Jonathan again. Thanks, Jonathan. That'll improve that experience for us. To the right of your screen, you're going to see a screen share of the mobile app, and you'll see Jonathan there. So you'll be able to see what would be seen in the mobile environment as well as in the web environment. And quickly, you're seeing his identification of both his name and his unit identifier, all customizable. You'll see the real date and time, which is constantly changing. You'll see his X and Y coordinates, and then you'll see the Z axis height above terrain that Prathima described. And remember that height above terrain denotes meters or feet and is accompanied by that color coding, which indicates a confidence level of the accuracy of the reading. So as Jonathan heads up the stairs, what does this mean to you as a first responder? Well, we're excited that this first generation capability of Z-axis exists for public safety today. So imagine now with responders using the app on their mobile devices, for example, as an officer pursuing a suspect, and then that dispatcher, incident commander, EOC, or other personnel within a department could be logged into the web app or the mobile app and tracking the location of key personnel in real time. And with an awareness of responders now in that vertical location accuracy that we simply haven't seen and hasn't existed before. So Jonathan, I'm going to jump back to you now. As a retired deputy chief, operationally, what are your thoughts as you climb the stairs? We're seeing you in real time at 18 feet and on the second floor of the building you're in.
Well, my first thought is I need to start doing some more exercising. My second thought is that for me as a first responder, this would have been an extremely valuable officer safety tool. Many times you might be in a building. Chicago has many high rises, and I worked in public housing complexes that were 25 stories high, and you may not remember if you're on a foot chase or you're racing to the scene of an emergency. You may not remember what floor you're on if you have to take the stairs. So I'm walking up now to the third floor.
And so now at the third floor, he shows at 25 feet height above terrain, which, he's in a building with about 12 feet height per floor. So that's a reasonable estimation. Remember, there's also a plus or minus 3 meters at that green circle confidence level. But really, we think that, understanding that this is a first evolution of the technology, it's providing information with some context that public safety simply hasn't had before, real time in the field. And now we see Jonathan at the fourth floor, jumping to 42 feet. How are you doing there, Jonathan?
I'm still breathing. I'm walking up to the fifth floor. You may recognize the stairway from the scenario, because this is the same place that we take the scenario.
Right. And so now fifth floor, and he's still headed up, and you're seeing now it's jumped about 5 feet. And as he continues to go, you see per landing is probably 5 or 6 steps. He's making that jump accordingly. Before we hand it back over to Kyle and Kevin, anything or actually we're going to hand it to Joe Grasso as well with PSCR. Remember, this is a capability that public safety can access and use today with their departments. And so Joe will be talking about forward-looking things, but anything to add, Jonathan, before we close up this demo?
No, I think it's been mentioned earlier, but hopefully the audience can kind of see now with an actual kind of live demo kind of the value of this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Great demonstration there. I want to get back to the chat real quick. What is the state of integration? Well, this is a general FirstNet question, I think. What is the state of integration with satellite service for functionality beyond cell service? And is there a plan to make services available in the areas where wildfires are becoming highly prevalent, even though these areas are not typically serviced with cellular networks? Maybe Chief McCarraher, you want to hit that one?
Thanks, Kyle. And it is. Wildland fires is a big priority for us. It's one of our overarching priorities for FirstNet this year. In addition to the terrestrial deployments that we have throughout the country, you also have a set of deployables. I know in Colorado specifically, deployables were put in the field last year during the wildland season to a high level of success to push broadband technology out for use for the folks doing out on the wildland fires. And I'm guessing that we'll be doing the same thing this year, if probably not better. And then we've done some focus group work with the wildland community on this specific technology to get their input in. And again, as I think it was both Kevin and Kyle said at the beginning, we reach out to public safety to make sure that we hear what you need. And I know what we heard from the wildland community is that they need this type of technology, and we'll be pushing that out this year, with our AT&T partners.
Thank you, Gary. And another quick question in regards to the app, and I think this may be for Prathima or maybe Kim or Jonathan. Is the calibration for the app a one-time process when first installed, or does it have to be repeated as conditions change, for example, location, weather, etc., or each time before entering a building?
It has to be repeated. It's not one time, because just like the question said, as environmental conditions change, recalibration would be needed. But here is the plus. Response of FirstNet application will prompt the user and let them know, hey, that the calibration needs to be done. And so all that the user will need to do is click on that button and they'll be guided through the steps.
Sorry, I was on mute. What is the typical data latency on the displayed hat value?
It's about 5 seconds. Typically, for the use of the appropriate use of battery and such, or our location on response of FirstNet updates every 5 seconds.
Thank you, Prathima, and thanks for the questions, everyone. We're going to go to our last presenter here, kind of for the future view, and that's going to be Joe Grasso from PSCR. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Great, yeah, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, and the future, right? The technology we just saw there, that Z-axis solution, that's something that exists today. What I want to talk about now is going down the road, looking even further into the future, and describe some of what's being done at the Public Safety Communications Research Division of NIST to advance public safety technology. So again, my name is Joe Grasso. I'm the LBS portfolio lead. And today I just want to communicate 3 things. 1, what's PSCR and how's it related to FirstNet? 2, what's the LBS portfolio up to? And 3, how can you get involved with PSCR? So let's go to the next slide. And I just want to give a quick disclaimer that I may mention a commercial product, but that's not an endorsement by NIST. Next slide. So PSCR, the Public Safety Communications Research Division, is the primary federal laboratory conducting research, development, testing, and evaluation for public safety communications technologies. We're part of the Communication Technology Laboratory, which is part of NIST, and that falls under the Department of Commerce. And if you click next, you'll see, or you already do see, that FirstNet is also part of the Department of Commerce. So we're linked there to the Department of Commerce, but we're also linked through an important piece of legislation here that we see on this slide, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. So that's the legislation that actually created FirstNet, but it's also legislation that set aside $300 million for NIST to perform R&D to ensure the success of FirstNet, and so that public safety can take full advantage of what FirstNet has to offer. So PSCR focuses on developing technologies that might still be years from the marketplace. There's plenty of research and development dollars being poured into consumer technologies like smartphones, et cetera. And PSCR is here to make sure that similar kinds of R&D is being done for public safety. Let's go to the next slide. Right, so similar to FirstNet, early on, PSCR undertook a road mapping process where he engaged public safety stakeholders, firefighters, EMS, police officers, emergency managers, et cetera, to try to understand what areas are in need of R&D. And those areas are what we have here on the screen now. I don't want to go into all of those, but I do want to hit on, in the next slide, the location-based services. So the location-based services portfolio concentrates on technologies related to indoor mapping, tracking, and navigation. And it's that indoor part that's really important here too, because as we heard a little bit about earlier, GPS works, but not always so well indoors. And so since we can't rely on GPS indoors, we need other technologies to do the job. Click again, and you'll see a list of different ways that we're investing to advance these technologies. And then click to the next slide, and I'll just talk right away about some of the work we're doing there. So indoor localization research, again, coming up with these technologies that work in GPS-denied environments, and beyond that, even work in an infrastructure-free way. We can't count on, as a public safety, can't count on beacons to be installed in buildings or other sensors that could help do that localization problem. No, we got to have something that works in an infrastructure-free way. So we've teamed up in cooperative agreements with various universities around the country and around the world to develop those technologies. And the scientists and engineers there are using things like inertial navigation or SLAM algorithms or signals of opportunity, various other ways too, to kind of solve that problem of how do you localize indoors. Next slide. So to help them out, internal research at NIST, we're trying to come up with a localization ground truth system that researchers could use to test the accuracy of their systems. So this should be a low cost, easy to implement test lab so that folks can compare their system to others. It allows some consistency in those comparisons, and would also allow public safety to evaluate technologies they're considering purchasing. Next slide. Right, so we're also looking at, as Gary mentioned earlier on, using Lidar systems for pre-incident planning. Lidar systems like this one shown here, they're mobile Lidar scanning systems, and they can create 3D maps just by walking around a building. And you can imagine having those maps could be really valuable from a pre-incident planning standpoint. And if you go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how we're trying to even automate further the possibilities for pre-incident planning. With our point cloud city efforts, we've teamed up with 3 municipalities to generate a data set of Lidar scans that have been labeled with public safety relevant objects. For instance, sprinkler risers or emergency exits or AEDs, things that might be identified during a pre-incident planning process, so that with that labeled data set, then computer scientists and researchers can generate the training sets necessary to train AI systems to automatically identify those objects. So hopefully that'll help speed up that pre-incident planning process by automating that identification. Next slide. Right, so another effort we undertook is with NAPSIG, the National Association of Public Safety GIS, to create the iAccess Best Practices Guide for Indoor Mapping, Tracking, and Navigation. So this guide provides a snapshot of current best practices and would allow responders and academia to work together to accelerate the adoption of these technologies. It's been created by a team of stakeholders that NAPSIG assembled, stakeholders in the public safety community. And as it gets further developed, we hope to be able to provide additional guidance to public safety agencies about what steps to take to make adoption of LBS technologies as smooth as possible. Next slide. And lastly, we've got prizes and challenges. And I know Gary mentioned earlier some of the collaboration between FirstNet and PSCR. One of those prizes and challenges being Tech to Protect, where we teamed up to advance software for public safety. But we've got another one coming up, the First Responder 3D Indoor Prize Challenge. And this again is going to really focus on advancing the technologies for doing indoor localization in an infrastructure-free way. So expect to hear more about this in the coming year. And if you go to the next slide, I'll point out that you can find out about this and a lot more at the pscr.gov webpage. These links should all be in the chat window too now, I think, including a link to sign up for our newsletter so you can stay up to date about what's going on at PSCR. On our webpage, you can see more about funding opportunities and other prize challenges that are active now, and also find out about our stakeholder meeting. We have a stakeholder meeting every summer, and the one this summer will be virtual, so it's free to attend. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's a great way to get your voice heard by the public safety community. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Kevin and Kyle.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that presentation and what we can kind of look forward to in the future. And always good to work with PSCR. I wish we could go back to Boulder, Colorado and do the tour again, because that's all eye-opening experience as well. So thank you so much for that. Going back to the question, really good questions today. Thank you, everyone. There's been a couple of questions around the API piece of this. And so let me just ask this question for anybody on the panel here. Can this be integrated with existing map software that are used for CAD or other applications?
The API and the SDK is for iOS and Android-based platforms because of the mobile nature of this, right? It has to pick up the barometric pressure sensor measurement from the mobile, the GPS location from the mobile. So it is for iOS and Android apps. Now, however, these apps running on the first responder devices in the field can then send back that location information back to CAD applications. And then the CAD applications use that location information to display on their CAD software. A little, which what you saw with responsive FirstNet application when Kim was demoing it, she had what looked like that incident commander or EOC or CAD mapping, whereas then the mobile application was sending that information back.
And when you think about the potential of that for places like Chicago, for example, where we have floor plans and blueprints for thousands of buildings that are accessible through the CAD that show elevation information. In the future, you could envision scenarios where that real-time Z-axis data is directly overlaid with some of that building footprint data, and just think of how much of a safety tool that's going to be.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that a response application is going to have in coming soon is first responders can drop markers to show where certain where the incident is or where a victim is and things of that nature, which can also be tagged with a Z component, even just for that location, right? Even though the location itself is not moving. So that can also then go back to the EOC or the dispatch.
Another question, given the minor differences in barometric pressures with elevation changes of a floor or two, would a running HVAC system create positive air pressure cause issues in accuracy?
We believe that that can have an impact on it. And that goes back to the same testing that I referred to. A lot of that was planned last year. And because of COVID, it has been pushed out, and that is going on. And some of that data is yet to come.
Maybe a future add to the app from one of the inputs on the chat here. Map on computer app shows building location and shot of Jonathan's phone screen, referring to the demo. But will it also slow vest cams or phone cams? Show. Altitude is good, but visuals make this much better. So thank you for that comment. Another question here, and then I'll pass it back to you, Kevin. Now that vertical location is available through FirstNet, is PSCR doing any research to quantify the value it provides to first responders? That's for you, Joe.
As far as evaluating the Z-axis solution from FirstNet, no, PSCR is not doing anything specific for that, but of course with our FR3D efforts and with our internal research for measuring the accuracy of these systems, it's all part of what we're doing there at PSCR.
Yeah, and I will also highlight that PSCR has been very collaborative with first responders. I know you had a challenge recently where you partnered with first responders to really make sure that the technology that you're developing puts their actual needs into consideration right at the start, the get-go of that. So, all right, Kevin, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Kyle, you're killing it, man. I think I've been blown away by all the questions and everything going on in here. So I think you've helped me a lot with monitoring the chat bar, but we still have a little bit of time left. And I guess the question would be, are there any more questions that we have? But Kyle, I saw.
Sure. Yeah.
Is there any other questions that you have? And I'm going to make sure that I drop all the other links. There's been a lot of links in here already. I'm going to put more in there. But Kyle, if you want to pull from any other questions you have, and let's continue to do rapid fire for another 5-8 minutes or so, and then we'll finish just after the hour.
Sure. Can there be limits, parentheses, similar to geofence, but on the vertical axis set, so that if a responder falls a certain amount of feet, other users can be notified?
Beautiful. That's another excellent question. Yes, those are the kind of things that we are looking to include in our applications in the future.
This is an interesting one. What is the risk if an agency chooses not to take advantage of Z-axis? I'm not sure if you can answer that or if you need more context.
From our perspective, this is one of the features that is being offered, and it's up to the agencies how they wish or when they wish to adopt it. But there may be others on the call who may have other insights as well.
While you guys are thinking that over, I also want to point out that part of our webinar series, we're going to be in March 4th, we're going to be doing a subscriber paid webinar. And that is in the chat. Thank you, Lisa, for dropping that in there. I don't know if that link came through all the way, but if you sign up for our list, we'll be sure to send you future webinars. I know there's been a few questions on deployables that Gary brought up. We're going to have a deployables webinar also on March 18th. And these webinars are really your opportunity here firsthand from users, similar to today, but users that are actually have real life experiences with these applications, or in this case, the deployables and other network resources that FirstNet brings to bear.
It's our intent with smartfirefighting.com, working with FirstNet Authority to host at least one of these a month on all the other different nuances within the report. So again, this is all about you and all the listener. Anything we can do, we'll send this is recorded. We will send a YouTube link out after this, along with some of the key questions and answering those. But if you have thoughts, let us know. We want to create content that's most valuable for you and really driving the most contextual, relevant information around technology in 2021. So any thoughts or other questions you have, let me know. I'm really happy. This was an action-packed hour, but I guess what we'll do is in the final moments here, if everyone, you don't have to, any of the speakers, if you want to give one last final thought, call to action, anything, 30 seconds or so. If you want to give anything, floor is yours now, and then we will end the webinar. Gary, you want to go first?
Thanks, Kevin. And again, thanks everyone for their time. You have to realize these are, as I said in my part of the presentation, these are all emerging, and we are attempting to make them fit your needs. And the only way we know what your needs are is when you tell them to us. So I just implore you to stay engaged with the FirstNet program, and we'll continue to be the catalyst for technology advances in the public safety space. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. Well said. Brandon?
I would just second what Gary had to say. This is something that FirstNet's invested in, and I think just seeing the various perspectives in the chat has helped open my eyes to the many applications that I hadn't thought of. So again, just staying engaged with FirstNet and providing us this feedback is absolutely critical.
We're all learning from each other. Jonathan?
To third that, I mean, this is a technology evolution, maybe even a revolution, and that the capabilities are continuing to expand. When you think about location tracking, you know, first it started on a vehicle with XY tracking, then it went to the person with smart devices with XY. Now it's at the person with vertical with Z axis. And Intrepid is the first app to take advantage of it, but I think we're going to see this continue to mature and evolve, and I think it's going to be a great first responder safety tool.
Thanks, Jonathan. Kim, you want to give a final thought here?
Yeah. Sorry, I can't get my video started, but no, I just wanted to share, there was that question about the consequences to an agency if they don't adopt the Z-axis technology. I wouldn't think of it as a consequence to your agency. You know, we understand technology is adopted by public safety as they have the means and resources to do that. Think of it as an extra tool in your toolbox. It's something that hopefully, as technology and location services advance for public safety, your agency will see the value and make the investment because they recognize that not making the investment over the long term could have a consequence for you. But right now it's a new tool and agencies should consider whether it makes sense for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. And sorry, I had turned your video off while the demonstration so we could see your screen while Jonathan's face, which I thought turned out well. But sorry, your video is disabled. Joe?
I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in, and thanks to FirstNet and Smart Firefighting for inviting PSCR to participate in this webinar. And I'm excited about this Z-axis solution and the fact that the API is available now. So thanks again.
Awesome. Prathemia?
Yeah, once again, thanks for everyone for joining this call. Thanks to you and the FirstNet organization for hosting this. If anybody is interested either in the API or in responsive FirstNet application and trialing that, feel free to let us know through firstnet.gov or through your FirstNet application consultant. We can make a trial available for free for you to try it out.
Thank you so much. Kyle, any final thoughts from you?
No, thanks to everybody. It's been, there's a lot of questions going on. I feel like there's a couple that we didn't quite answer here with the time we had allotted. So I'll be sure to follow up with some of you, and please drop me an email. I put my email in the email here, and to Prathima's point, if you want to learn more about that API, I'd be happy to connect you with the folks at FirstNet AT&T as well. Thanks again, Kevin, for hosting us.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for giving us your time today. Again, please reach out and let us know what you want to hear about, what you want to learn about. We'll be sending out a YouTube link of this recorded webinar. We will aggregate all the key questions and key notes and include that in some of the follow-up later on. Again, thank you all very much, and to all the panelists that gave us our time today and all your wisdom. Thank you for all you're doing. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to seeing what's next with all this. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Safe.